morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. It's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid, a channel I'm creating to not only to bring awareness to complex trauma and everything that I've learned through lived experience and being around the advocacy and practitioner side of it for many, many, many years, but also delving into understandings around how it works within us and exploring ways of healing. And in today's video, I want to start to explore something that most of us have never thought of, but all of us have. And that is the character or the story that we are, our narrative. You know, if you look at it, if you were to write yourself into a story, the character that you would write in is your narrative, the internal workings, all the stuff the character says inside, and how the character wants to be perceived. That's the character's narrative, and that's what we do in all of our interactions in this world. Now, when we come from a trauma base, all of our survival states, all of our interpretations and perceptions, triggers, defensive structures, all these protective mechanisms are all the scaffold that our narrative is created upon and reinforced through years of trial and error in how to protect ourselves. And having an understanding of this and looking at it as a character story is a little less triggering than having to go, well, this didn't work and why. And it's a way of understanding something that I feel in this modern world we really need to. And the biggest component, or the biggest reason, is our narrative. If we are not aware of it, we are so easily manipulated. Throughout human history, we have human story, we have mythology, and so that is ingrained within us a structure that we are a story unfolding. So we will easily accept a story. Our entertainment runs on stories. Well, so does the narrative of the character that we are. And never in human history has things been so intently manipulative in our society. The more digital we become, the whole science of marketing and advertising, the whole science of spin. A politician is not elected, or a government is not elected on what they do. It's on selling you on something. Selling you an idea. They spend the majority of their budgets on selling their ideas, not actually governing, not actually, constructing a functional society. We're bombarded with advertisements. We're bombarded with these things, everything around marketing from our first breath. So we are preconditioned to be manipulated. And if we have no idea what our narrative is, we will get played over and over again. We see this in our society, all the layers of conditioning. And if you step back and honestly look at it, the Western world loves to criticize the dictatorship, but the Western world is no different. The structures are identical, and it's been so critically evident in the last few years how the structures are no different. Everything in our society is sold to us, and we really need to get an understanding of our narrative so that we don't get played. And as I said, when you come from a trauma base, without understanding our narrative, it's almost impossible to heal. Because you're never understanding why things happen to you the way they do. Our narrative shapes our physical reality. Our narrative is part of the ecology that manifests our physical reality, as when I delved in the last videos. It's this thing that we really need to take the time and value our story. Another key component of understanding around the negative aspects, one of the negative aspects that occurs through narratives is, I know for me it's quite common. I have no idea why I've said something and it is interpreted. Sometimes I have no idea how it's been interpreted the way it has. And I've gotten a person offside and I have no idea why. And as a consequence of my trauma, that conversation will play out infinitum, thousands and thousands of times, trying to see where it went wrong. And when I learned to view things in a narrative structure, coming from a more indigenous base, story is such a part of that base that it gave me the way of going, my story is not compatible with theirs. So there's a component of my story that triggers their defensive structures. And there's the vehicle for me to be able to understand why. More often than not, when you get a person offside, it's due to a compatibility of narratives. And if it's something that you need to learn to negotiate, it gives you a way of actually seeing what the problem is to negotiate. Now I'm going to delve more into the healing aspects of this in part 2. But as I said, it is really important to know what is going on. And viewing things as a narrative is an excellent way to get an idea of what happens. But as I said earlier in this video, the biggest reason for making this is understanding how we're manipulated. One of the areas I see happen a lot in this modern world, particularly when you come from a child abuse base, I see how survivor groups manipulate into, I'm not talking about the positive ones, there are really positive ones, but there are certain demographics in our society that feed upon, I'm talking about gang structures, I'm talking about, I don't want to name anything because I'm going to cop a whole bunch of flack, but it's the thing of, there are groups, there are certain religious types, groups and organizations, there are certain street types, music genre types, sexual persuasive types, all these different facets of human sociology that feed and prey upon certain types of people that have gone through certain types of traumas. Because they're easy to manipulate. They don't have a base of confidence in who they are, so they can be told who they are. An easy example is how Hitler played Germany in the building up for World War II. The aftermath of losing World War I and all the societal, he used nationalism, he used his own area of nationalism. And look at what happened. We see it in how the memes play out on social media, where truth is irrelevant. But a meme says you need to feel this way because you've gone through this, do this and say this and hold this belief and attack these particular types of people. We see it play out all the time. And when our narrative gets manipulated, our welfare means nothing to those manipulating it. And that's easy because they don't ask our perspective, they tell it. And this is why and where our world is headed now, and the views of things that are developing sociologically, particularly in the Western world. This is one of the motivations between me trying to raise this subject. And as I said, it's a huge area. People's stories is huge, and it is so ingrained in our structure. As I said, coming from mythology and all of that, religion and everything else, that we really need to take some time and get our head around. How do we, what's the character? How do we see ourselves? How do we write ourselves into a book, into a story, into this life? And how do we get an understanding of who we actually are, functional and dysfunctional, so that we can tell that we're being played? And that's one of the biggest things. Because as I said, for me, if somebody tries to sell me something that I haven't gone out looking for, I automatically question it. Because I don't need to be convinced I need something. I need to work out, do I actually need that? Is that belief system actually part of it, what I'm looking for? And so forth and so forth. And it's a way of, when you start to look at this stuff, it's a way of actually protecting yourself a little bit better, but also understanding why things go south, so that after it, you're not tearing yourself up as much. But as I said, I want to get into the healing of it and some of these little nuances in part 2. So, as always, be kind and gentle with yourself. Take the time, and as I said, just look at it. How would you see yourself as a character in a book? It's really that simple. And let that evolve. As always, I love your feedback and comments, and stay safe, and I'll see you shortly in part 2. I hope.